Council Report 9.5 on tonight's agenda is on page 79 and relates to Community Funding Program Review and Policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the item?
I will, and we'll try to do so briefly because this has come to us a number of times, and it's quite a positive that it's come to us a number of times because this community funding policy is an evolving beast, and it's something that Council undertook in towards the end of our previous term to have a thorough look at how we invest money back into the community, into community groups, and ultimately gain that net community benefit from that spend. In this council term, we will spend close to $2 million through our community funding program, and that's over a range of different methods, be it community grants, service subsidies, sponsorship, etc. This review is basically a 2 years in stock take of where we're at and a look at how we can continue to develop this policy to ensure we're getting the best community dividend. There's 21 recommendations in this report that have come through an auditor's review, an evaluation and community feedback, and they're outlined, I think, from page number 95 onwards, and they're just things that Council has learnt over the time about how we can continue to develop this policy and this program to ensure that our money is well spent, that it is being delivered to the right groups, that we're not making obtaining council funds or grants too difficult, and picking up on our events and festivals review that was just moved previously. One of the recommendations in this report is to look at that idea of neighbourhood festivals and events, and providing a funding stream for those sort of events. So I commend the team that behind the scenes have been developing this policy. It has been a huge amount of work dating back to those days where councillors would have their own funds that they would dish out. It's a transparent process, and I think it will be something that we continue to develop to ensure that we as council invest back into our community and get that real net community benefit.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the most important reason that I support this motion is the fact that we've got a transparent process, and what has happened in the past with all the best intentions under the sun, and this is the process of iteration and experience going on here. We've basically had most of this model in place for the last few years, but nobody's been able to talk about what it looks like. And yet if you go to page 81 of our papers now, you've got a lovely little table there that sets it out very easily. In the old test of being able to do the 30-second elevator conversation to explain what this is about, we've actually got something that equates to that. And hopefully this will mean that community groups who want to participate in our community, who want to develop and be part of who want to be part of the development and growth of our community, and who we should be encouraging and really actively encouraging to do things, because they do extraordinary work that gives us a multiplier effect many times over. We've got a way of actually showing them what's what and how quickly it can be done and when to expect it. And I know that Councillor Nation over time has raised things like, the vouchers and donations and sponsorships, which are often forgotten, but they are actually mechanisms by which council can salt a good idea or reward good effort and make things happen for our community. And so I commend this motion to you. I think it's got excellent possibilities, and I just wish that as our community expands, that we will continue to grow the quantum dollar that's involved in this. One of the more interesting things is that we have finally achieved something in this that I know was pet of Councillor Lawrence's, which is to separate some of the business stuff out. So businesses actually can be compared to businesses in terms of actually making applications. And that people who are doing stuff on the basis of cultural and other things are being compared in that space. And big grants aren't necessarily what everybody needs. People just need things that get them going. I'm reminded of the food project down in Flemington that is run totally voluntarily by many, many people. It has no constitution. It has no office bearers. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they are putting out 30 to 40 to 50 meals a day, feeding lots and lots of people and doing it for nothing. They've had one fundraiser in all that time. Otherwise, it's just been donations from the local community.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Lawrence.
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity. The change in this whole grant system is terrific, and I thank Councillor Cusack for his comment on business. It does separate everybody out into different areas, and we're not confusing the different requests for different types of funding, and that's critical when you're trying to deal with someone from a particular service club as opposed to a swimming club, as opposed to a business who's just wanting a bit of a leg up to run a program. It's good. It gives clarity to the community that we represent, and I think that's important too. There's been confusion in the past as to what can and cannot get grants, and maybe there was some favouritism from certain councillors when that system operated, which was going back some time, and I'm not accusing anybody in this room of anything relating to that, of course. This was just the process that we had, as Councillor Nation pointed out, that the councillors had their own little stash, but now it's all out in the open. Everybody gets a say in it, and it's transparent, and there can be no confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
I will just briefly to outline how the biannual responsive and partnership grants have been broken up for this next financial year. The biannual grants will now come in 4 funding streams, being community up to $20,000, business up to $20,000, events and festivals, which I touched on before, up to $20,000, and that important social support grant, which wasn't in the first version of this policy, but Councillor Cusack definitely argued for its implementation, and that's up to $1,500 for those small community groups, your play groups, your elderly citizens groups who just want to have an outing or want their tea and coffee provided for the year. And that's not something that you can necessarily match against the criteria that would score really highly, but it is such an important way of keeping members of the community engaged and participating. There's the responsive grants, which now, rather than lumping them all in together, are split up into the individual participation, the neighbourhood activation, which we touched on in the previous report, the donations and the vouchers. And then the final stream is the partnership grants, which were previously called service subsidies, which was quite a convoluted name. The partnership grants are in essence exactly that. They're organisations coming to council, partnering with council to help provide a service that council might not currently provide, that might be in need, and council working together with these organisations, again, to deliver that net community benefit. So I'm really impressed at how this has evolved, and once again commend the team behind the scenes for continuing to develop this to ensure we have the best possible community funding program.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.6 on tonight's agenda is on page 115 and relates to Alma Street Aberfeldy, interim and permanent heritage controls. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Just move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the item?
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor, this is a fairly self-evident report and endorses Council's previous interim position. The Heritage Gap study of 2014 is what it's based on, and the significant study that was that has a positive impact on protecting places of historical significance in the Moonee Valley City Council. There's minor changes that are in the from the previous report that came to Council, and that specifically relates to the garage in one case, and also a 4 metre distance from the current residence, which isn't included in the heritage listing. So those 3 points are tabled there, and it's fairly self-explanatory, as I said. But it's great to see that the council is continuing on this path of trying to uphold our heritage and retain it, not just for the current generation, but for generations to come. And I can only hope that will continue for future councils, because once it's gone, we can never get it back. And there's been enough demolition of wonderful properties that we'll never see again in all parts of the municipality, particularly the older parts of Eston and Moonee Ponds, Ascot Vale, Flemington, and that has to be retained at all costs. So we just have to be very mindful of that. I don't like to see these type of changes put into a recommendation that's already gone to the minister, but obviously there was reason that they chose to want these changes, but it doesn't impact on the demolition of the property, thank goodness. It does affect the garage, but I don't think there's too much in the garage that we need to be too troubled about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm aware that Councillor Sharp was keen to second this motion, and I dropped in on her and I didn't mean to. But I suppose in seconding this motion, a couple of reflections. One is that even with the best intentions, when we do identify places within our heritage studies and so on like that, slips can occur. And this site has come within a whisker of being demolished because we weren't able to move quickly enough to beat an application to demolish and so on like that. However, with all of the best effort of our staff and so on like that, we've been able to turn that around and make something of it. So this motion is important from that point of view, and the intrinsic value of that property at 5 Alma Street. But I think it's a salient reminder that we have many properties, as Councillor Lawrence has pointed out, in our municipality that are of equal significance, and that 1A, that we need to be diligent in making sure that they are protected, and B, that we really keep working hard through this long-term plan that we've had around heritage, through the gap studies, into the phase that we're in now, and keep picking up these properties, and do that and have that complemented by the environmental stuff that we're doing in respect of our significant trees and the likes of that, because our neighbourhoods are identified. This municipality is identified by its neighbourhoods that are green and leafy. It is something special out in this part of the western suburbs and the northwest suburbs of Melbourne, and is not something that is there by mistake. It's there because it was put there, and it was there because people have actually taken the time to think about it. And that's the importance of the heritage, and why this is such an important piece of work that's gone on.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I actually hesitated whether I wanted to even move or second this motion, actually, because basically this report, we've gone through the process of having an interim heritage overlay put over this site, then we've gone to the panel. Now, the panel is effectively saying in this report, now keep in mind that we're looking at a corner site here, corner of Alma Street and Beaver Street, a very prominent corner. The panel effectively are saying that the garage wall, although we have insisted that the garage wall should be part of the heritage significance, the panel has dismissed that along with making a note that from the main, I'll read it out, reference should be made to in the citation to distinguish the land to the rear of the main house beyond 4 metres south of the gutter line of the main roof, which to me means that the little tack on, a lot of heritage places and older places have, and the name of it eludes me, but the little tack on that you have past the main roof line effectively is not part of the heritage significance of the building.
Just for clarity, I think it's called a lean-to.
Thank you. That is it. Thank you very much.
What's it called, Councillor?
Lean-to.
A lean-to.
A lean-to.
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 It's a little tack on that used to happen very often. Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. So basically, from the main roof line of the house to the extent to the backyard is not included in the heritage overlay. So picture what will happen. A wall will go up right against, just past the main wall of the building, and the backyard will be developed. So I've got concerns with how this is all going to play out, because the whole idea of this was to protect the heritage value of the house. If you develop the backyard of a heritage home, what do you think is going to happen to the value of that, to the heritage significance of that house? To my mind, it's going to be diminished, because it is not the way that the house is effectively not the way that it stood for all this time. So I understand that the panel has made its decision, but for me, I really think that it is diminishing the whole heritage significance of this place. It is truly a magnificent building. Like I said, it's a grand home on a significant corner. So to have the panel come back and say effectively, you can, and that's what will happen. Effectively, you can develop the backyard. I don't know whether I can. The problem is for me, if I don't support this motion, I'm not supporting the heritage on the building. But if I do support it, yes, I'm supporting the heritage. But what significance will that house have if the backyard's developed? So, yes, that's my concern, and I'm torn. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words?
Can I just ask a point of clarification on what the size of the backyard is? I'm trying to look through the appendices, but I can't. Is it even going to be big enough to put dwellings on?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, it would seem that the panel recommendation has been written with that in mind, and that's Councillor Sharp's point.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Lawrence, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, taking Councillor Sharp's point, it's difficult to heritage list land, I guess, at the end of the day, and that is the dilemma we're faced with, or I'm assuming that's where the panel's comes to its decision, and it may not be, it may be, but I take your point, and it is something that we have no control over ultimately. As a council, it's something that the panel decided, and we're left with the result of that decision. I guess it hasn't changed my overall opinion that we have to retain these heritage buildings. This is a significant building in the Aberfeldy part of our ward, Buckley Ward, and that's something that I would hate to see demolished, whether the land around it is not listed as part of that package. At least we're retaining the building that is what we're really trying to protect, and that's what I would feel strongly about. I guess we can go further down the planning track and say, should there be further construction or development done on the backyard or the land that surrounds the building, then it has to have some conditions that it meets in terms of its building design and how it fits in with the local character of that area, which of course is going to be related to the heritage listed building on the corner. So that would be my only avenue of trying to ensure that the area stays as it should. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 9.7 on tonight's agenda is on page 118 and relates to East Timor Program Review. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack.
Mayor, I'd like to move the motion in line with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the item?
Mayor, our council has had a long relationship with East Timor since the bitter days of 1999, when this country sought its independence from, or voted to be independent from, Indonesia. Many of us followed on the front pages of the paper the disaster that happened after that, and the tragic loss of life. Somewhat estimated at over 250,000 people died in that whole process. We saw and know that there were many parts of East Timor basically ransacked and left without any mechanisms by which surviving people could even have any sort of life. We know that the country has predominantly a very young population. We know that the country has gone through extraordinary stresses over the last 18 years to move it towards a strong democracy. At times in that process, it has nearly fallen over. There was a coup in 2006, there was assassination attempts and so on like that. But still, it has struggled on. Moonee Valley, through its relationship with Likasar, has been a significant contributor to that community. We've installed solar panels. We have, through our NGOs that we work with in partnership, have provided support to mothers, expectant mothers, and we've also established a new and growing IT support business that is a cooperative that is winning small contracts throughout all of East Timor, both for training and also for the development of networks that people need. So, main example being the police in the area. But with that change that is occurring in East Timor, and the changes that have occurred within our own community over the 18 years, there has been somewhat of a divergence of effort of what's required. And so this proposal in front of us realigns where council is. And it gives us the opportunity to have a think about sort of how do we move on and still support and maintain our commitment to East Timor, that we signed only a few years ago with representatives from Nicassar and is proudly displayed on the wall of this council chamber. How do we do that in a world where we're not using the outcomes of the race meeting and so on like that? So council's being asked through option 2 to provide two things. One is the $2,000 grant per year, which will also be supplemented through other fundraising things such as the sale of East Timorese coffees and so on like that. And maybe we might just make that a wholesale change across the whole of the council with a bit of luck. But then we also have other partnerships with other communities in the municipality who are not just focusing on Nicassar but have a broader view, and we would like to partner with those. The other thing that we're looking for and seeking support from the council is to allocate some resource to making that actually work. You can't just establish something and not put any boots on the ground. So we need that as part of what this option 2 is. But option 2 will also, help us to maintain our commitments, as I said earlier. It also will grow and strengthen where there has been a vacuum, our connections back to that community. It will also work better with opportunities that are coming out of the state government, which has for a number of years now, where irrespective of the people who are occupying the front benches of the government benches of Spring Street, have always shown bipartisan support for the East Timorese initiatives, and how we can work better with other councils and other friendship groups to actually strengthen what we're doing. So I'm asking you to support this recommendation and to consider that this is not just something that is happening in a bubble, but that in fact our community of Moonee Valley gains a lot from this, and that of course the spin-off is the East Timorese community, both in the Broad and also in Nicassar.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief because Councillor Cusack, as always when speaking on this matter, always takes his full allocation of time and speaks very well. But no, I think that this is something that I've ummed and ahed with about, and I'm still not necessarily convinced on the coffee bean side of things, but I really like the process that's been put in place, and to have a formal agreement with lots of benefactors of this. As Councillor Cusack says, people in East Timor will benefit, people in Moonee Valley and the wider community will benefit as well. And I just think having it through the grant stream makes it a bit cleaner as well. I did want to note for people who haven't read it, we obviously used to do a fundraiser at the Moonee Valley Racecourse to raise money for this. However, and I can see your face, but I think in terms of where council sits with responsible gambling and the development at the Moonee Valley Racecourse, we obviously pulled that at the start of this council term and no longer have it as a fundraiser. So to continue to support this program, there obviously had to be some changes made, which is what this report and recommendation has done. So it's a small amount of money going towards programs, but with the council officers' time, I think there can be some really big impact. So I'm looking forward to see how it goes for the next 4 years or for the life of the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? I'd just like to say a few words as well. I've always supported East Timor, as Councillor Cusack could attest to. Right from when we first got on the council, this was one of the biggest things on council back in 2004, wasn't that right, Councillor? And look, and as much as what you said about gambling reforms and everything, but the majority of the great work that this council did for Nicassar actually came from the race day. And it wasn't like we were encouraging gambling. It was actually we were doing it for a benefit, and it didn't cost the ratepayers any money out of this. And I personally would like to see the race day come back as a way of saying thank you, and as a way of actually not using taxpayers' money, but actually, creating money. So, Councillor Cusack, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick observations. The policy that we have in front of us has been developed through extensive consultation with a number of people who are very experienced in this area, and they have the political aspect of it through the East Timorese Consul here in Victoria, also through the East Timorese partnership networks, the state government program director International Department of the Program Director International from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, local government, and we've also have a number of connections with the VUT and through Dr. Bob Brown, and feedback from various other stakeholders. The opportunities in front of us are quite extraordinary. There's a couple of examples given in the summary of the paper we have in front of us, and one is around using the NGO, the Expand, to purchase carbon credits, and the other one is to look at the With One Seed program. Both of these projects have an interesting connection. If you understand and appreciate the environments and the types of property, land that is available up on the equatorial belt, you often know, or you should know, that volcanic islands have very limited soil, and the East Timorese only form of fuel is to chop down what exists in terms of timber, and we've got to get away from that, and you've got to replace that because topsoil just disappears. All you've got is rock, and you can't be sustainable. So these are projects that have long-term benefits to that community, and as I said, we have always had a reciprocal thing. We have recently had people out from East Timor to visit council, to learn from council, and those are the sorts of things we might be able to maintain.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Council Report 9.8 denies injuries on page 129 and relates to a special charge scheme for a right-of-way in Tennyson Street, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, I just need clarification on something then. Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Gauci-Murici. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this matter has been going on for quite a number of years now, and from our most recent discussions that I have with residents and officers, council is because of the way the drainage point is connected to the ROW, council it's considered excessive, so council will contribute to the works for this ROW, which of course is of great benefit to the residents. So I was glad that we were able to get that part of it sorted. But the crux of it is that when it's heavy or when it rains, a number of properties down there flood, particularly when it's the 1 in a 100 year flood. It's not good at all down there. So the residents have been agitating for this to happen for quite some time. I will note that there has been some dissension as well. It's certainly not 10 out of 10 people that want this done. So this recommendation is to take the report further by way of having a special committee formed where ward councillors will hear from submitters, so residents, should they wish to speak to us directly about it. So there is, I would like to hear directly again from residents, I guess, because we had 4 say yes to progressing this matter and 4 non-responses. So I think the best way forward, considering it's been going on for so long, is to progress this to the special meeting, and then we can hear it as ward councillors, hear the submissions, and then take from there and see if there is, well, hope there is the majority support for the works to be done, because it does need to be settled.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gauci-Marici.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, just as Councillor Sharp mentioned, of the 14 residents, 5 said yes, 5 said no, and 4 didn't respond at all. So whilst 50% is a pass in an exam, it's still important for us to be able to understand whether there is support for it or not. And the committee gives us the opportunity to seek that feedback before confirming our decision. Given this was one of the very first matters we debated when I was first elected to council, I look forward to seeing the end of it either way. So,
thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just to reiterate, being another ward councillor for Buckley Ward, this has been a very long and I believe has been going on for some time prior to even myself or Councillor Gauci-Marici becoming a councillor, and no doubt previous ward councillors have had this issue debated over and over with local residents. I think without putting too much pressure on the local residents, because not everybody has got the resources to come up with the money to cover these type of issues, but if there could be some consensus amongst the residents that back onto that ROW, then it would be a great thing that somewhere along the way, however it turns out, that we can come up with a solution to a vexing problem that is caused by obviously water rushing down. And we just need to get it sorted and get it sorted quickly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. Just first of all, point of clarification through the chair. On page 131, the final sentence states 10 responses have been received, of which 4, in brackets 5, were in support. Is it 4 or is it 5? Because it says 4, but it has a 5 in brackets.
Madam, Mr Mayor, it is 5.
It is
just
5.
a correction to the report.
Thank you. Look, even on that point, and totally acknowledging that this is something that needs to be done, and taking guidance from ward councillors, we did resolve on the 26th of April 2017 that council only proceed with a special charge scheme if there is majority of support from property owners. 5 out of 14 is not majority support. 5 out of 10 is not majority support. You need a half plus 1. So I just question if this is the correct step based on that previous resolution of council. I don't need an answer to that, but I just think if we've resolved that we will only proceed if there is a majority of support, 5 and 10 is still not...
So, Councillor, are you asking for clarification?
No, I'm just stating that I won't be supporting it because we do have an outstanding resolution which states majority support, and there was not majority support.
Just for my clarification, the people that don't vote, is that considered a positive or a negative vote?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's broadly considered positive, although as officers we would always caution councillors to that we're not 100% sure that people will have read and understood the documentation, and hence the benefit in this instance that we are going just one step down the process. We are not committing anybody to expenditure of funds at this stage.
Okay. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Bird.
Just a point of clarification. So it goes to the ward councillors, but will it then come back to council again?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it was not the intent to bring it back through the chamber, although that could occur if it was deemed appropriate.
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, would the mover and seconder potentially put that in as an additional dot point? Well, I think we need an extra dot point to ensure there's a majority support.
So
I'm happy to foreshadow a motion.
Foreshadow a motion, okay. All right. I'll accept the foreshadowed motion.
Can I just add a point? I'm happy to add a point 7.
You happy to add a point 7?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'll word it.
Okay.
Bring a report
Okay, well,
back
Councillor, someone needs to move an amendment to your motion. So...
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move a formal amendment, point 7.
Yep.
Being that a further report comes back to council following the section, what's the meeting called? The Special Committee of Council. You have it up on the screen. For the final decision. Can I see how that's written, please?
Could I just have clarity, Mr Mayor?
Sure.
If we don't have a majority, as Councillor Nation points out, of residents in favour of this, there's no need to bring it back to council, is that right?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I guess the contention here lies with the definition of majority, and there's clearly a degree of discomfort from some of the councillors about what constitutes a majority. In the sense that it does 50%, should there be 50%, it could be agreed that it must be 51%, for example, to constitute a majority. That could form part of the resolution, which would then allow it to move through at that point.
Thank you for that. So is that all, Councillor Lawrence?
Well, if I think we need clarity on that as ward councillors to know exactly what is a majority.
Point of clarification, a majority is greater than half. So 50% is not a majority. Google it, look it up in the Oxford.
So, Mayor, just back to meeting procedures, we're still trying to get this formal amendment. If we can just get that up, and then we can debate the amendment.
Exactly. So we're right, Kate?
For a final decision.
Mr Mayor, if I could just have clarity again, because if we put this amendment in, it's basing it on a final decision. So it's saying to bring it back to council based on the final decision. But if the final decision is not a majority, then it should not come back to council.
Through Mr Mayor, that's correct. The contention would be that if we had 50% and, for example, a number of people hadn't responded and that was deemed to be in favour, I'm just moving with the concerns of the councillors in the chamber. We certainly won't be bringing it back if we don't have a majority.
So we're putting the horse before the cart, or just...
Okay.
I think we're getting...
I'm not debating the issue. I'm just debating whether this amendment is clear. I'm not debating anything. I'm just wanting clarity on what's going on.
At the end of the amendment, should there be majority support of all respondents?
It's your amendment.
Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
All right, so does the mover and the seconder accept...
We haven't got a seconder.
Oh, we haven't got a seconder. Okay.
We haven't got a seconder to the amendment.
All right, do we have a seconder to the amendment? As we don't have a seconder to the amendment... So no one's going to second the amendment?
No.
Okay.
I'm happy to...
Councillor Cusack will second the amendment. So does the mover accept the amendment?
I need to put the amendment to the vote.
Okay, we'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? So we have... Yep.
Those in favour are Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypick, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gacci-Marici. Those against, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Nation.
I'm sorry, I didn't vote then.
Oh, okay.
So Councillor Lawrence has abstained.
Okay, so the amendment is now the motion. So Councillor Sharp. You speak again, yes.
Oh, I don't need to speak again. It's all good.
Okay, now do I need a seconder for this?
It's been seconded by Councillor.
Okay. So, Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the item?
Councillor Lawrence.
I didn't second the item.
The amendment's been put and carried. We're now moving to the substantive motion. The speakers thus far have been Councillor Sharp, Councillor Gauchi-Marucci, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Nation.
Okay.
Have spoken.
All right. Would anybody else? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. Considering I moved the amendment, I suppose I probably should put in a few words. I completely understand where Councillor Nation is coming from, and it doesn't sit. It didn't sit great with me that the wording that the council only proceed with special charges scheme if there's a majority support from the property owners after issuing the revised questionnaire. Unfortunately, whilst we know what a majority is, because we have 4 non-respondents and it's deemed that they're probably a yes, but we don't really know, it makes it very difficult. So it's sort of with a 50-50 decision. That's why we put in point 7, and hopefully after the special committee meeting we'll have more answers. We don't have to go ahead with this because obviously we want to make sure we're doing the right thing by the majority of the residents, and yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Cusack.
Well, an issue like this, while we might play with the semantics of it, as we have about the last few minutes, the reality is we've still got water going down a right-of-way flooding people's houses, which to me creates a risk for council and all ratepayers if it can be shown that we were tardy in making some sort of decision, or not tardy, but not able to make a decision about something as practical as how do you get rid of the water. Now, a solution may come up through this process. I don't know. Maybe there might be a resident who dreams up some sort of brand new trick that sorts things out. I fully appreciate why certain residents who aren't affected by the water are loath to put their hand in their pocket. But at the end of the day, if they don't put their hand in their pocket, they're also connected to the fact that this blasted water runs down the hill from their place. And so they are joined in the issue. And so somewhere along the line, trying to find a solution is a really worthwhile thing. Putting this committee together, seeking further comment from residents, maybe getting some clarification about what could be done or might not be done. If there are people who are concerned about the money and how they can, whether they can afford it or whatever, is there a way that council can consider their way around that, or consider its way around that, and engage people? These are matters for that committee to think and talk about. And if there is a report to come back to council, if a decision is able to be made, let's entertain that rather than keep on guessing and hoping that we're going to get something right.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carry unanimously. Oh, sorry, I can't see it. All those in favour?
Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauchi-Marucci, Councillor Lawrence.
All those against?
This is Councillor Nation.
Thank you. Next item on tonight's agenda is notice of motion. Councillors, do we have any notices of motion tonight? No. Urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business tonight? No. Confidential reports. The next item of business is a confidential report, and councillors, we have one confidential report. So councillors, do I have a motion that the meeting be closed to the public to consider the matter which contains information relating to other matters? Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Byrne. Councillors, I'll just go straight to the vote. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen of the gallery and of our live streaming audience, that concludes tonight's council meeting, and thank you for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again at the public forum next Tuesday night. Good evening and God bless.